Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and welcome back to another Carnivore Q&A. Stephen here with Team Euphoric, and today I'm going to be sharing some steak tenderizing tips by going over 5 different methods to help tenderize your steak.
Today we're diving into the juiciest topic that can turn a tough, chewy steak into a tender, melt-in-your-mouth masterpiece. That's right, we're talking about steak tenderization. I'll be comparing 5 different methods that promise to make your steak as tender as you dream. And let me tell you, there's a lot more to it than just hitting it with a hammer. Let's start with my go-to method, the dry brine. This technique is a game changer, especially for those who like to keep things simple. Dry brining involves coating your steak with salt and letting it sit uncovered in the fridge. The salt draws out moisture initially, which then dissolves the salt. The salty liquid is reabsorbed and the salt begins to break down the muscle proteins, making them tender. What you get is a steak with a beautifully intensified flavor, a great crust, and, most importantly, tender meat throughout. The pros of the dry brine is that it's incredibly simple. All you need is salt and thyme. It also enhances the natural flavor of the meat without any additional ingredients and creates a firm yet tender steak with a great crust. The cons are that it is time-consuming. Dry brining requires the steak to sit for several hours and preferably overnight. On a personal note, I find that it is best when left between 24 to 72 hours. It can also slightly dry out the steak's surface if left too long. If you want a straightforward method that enhances flavor and texture without complicating your life, dry brine is the way to go.
Sorry, but I have to interrupt this video to ask for your help. These new videos aren't cheap to edit, so if you're liking the new style, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the join button down below this video. It's only $5 per month and will really help with the video editing budget. Plus, you'll get a ton of other perks like ad-free videos, early access to videos, and complete access to hundreds of member-only videos. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Next up is the meat tenderizer tool, the good old mechanical approach to making your steak tender. This method involves using a tenderizer, which is a tool with small blades or needles that pierce the meat. This physically breaks down the muscle fibers and connective tissue, making the steak more tender. You can expect a tender steak, though the texture can sometimes feel more processed or less natural. The pros to using a meat tenderizer is that it works instantly and it creates uniformly tender meat. The cons is that it can make the meat feel too tenderized, almost mushy if overdone, and puncturing the meat can cause it to lose some of its juices during cooking. Using a meat tenderizer is perfect for when you need to tenderize a steak quickly, but be careful not to overdo it if you want to maintain that natural steak texture. Now, let's explore the dairy route of letting your steak sit in milk. Milk contains lactic acid and calcium, which help to break down the proteins in meat. The calcium activates enzymes in the meat that break down proteins, while the lactic acid gently tenderizes the meat. This method yields a steak that is tender and has a slight sweetness from the milk, but the flavor is very mild. The pros of letting your steak sit in milk is that it's a gentle tenderization. It won't turn your steak into mush, and it gives a mild flavor that is subtle with slightly sweet undertones. The cons of letting your steak sit in milk is that the flavor profile may not be intense enough for some carnivores, and it can be a bit messy as it requires rinsing the steak thoroughly before cooking to avoid milk residue. Letting your steak sit in milk is ideal for those who want a gently tenderized steak with a mild flavor, but it might be too subtle for some. For those who like a little science experiment in your kitchen, try covering your steak with baking soda. Baking soda raises the pH on the meat's surface, making it more alkaline. This alters the meat's proteins, preventing them from bonding excessively, which keeps the meat tender. You can expect a steak that is tender and juicy, but be warned that this method can alter the flavor if not done correctly. The pros to covering your steak with baking soda is that it works quickly, with just 15 to 20 minutes needed. It also yields a very juicy steak that helps retain moisture during cooking. The cons to covering your steak in baking soda is that if not rinsed properly, the steak can have a slightly bitter taste and overuse can make the meat too soft or mushy. Covering your steak in baking soda is a quick method that works wonders when done right, but it requires a careful hand to avoid off flavors. Finally, we have the tropical twist of letting your steak sit in freshly cut pineapple or pineapple juice. Pineapple contains bromelain, an enzyme that breaks down protein chains. This process can tenderize the meat, but be careful as bromelain is powerful and can turn your steak into mush if left too long. You can expect a steak that's tender with subtle sweetness from the pineapple, but you have to time it just right. The pros of letting your steak sit in pineapple is that it's a very effective tenderization technique that works even on the toughest cuts, and it adds a hint of sweetness and tropical notes. The cons of letting your steak sit in pineapple is that if you leave it too long, you'll end up with a mushy mess, and the pineapple flavor may not be to everyone's liking. Overall, letting your steak sit in pineapple is great for those who enjoy a bit of sweetness with their steak, but be vigilant with the timing. So there you have it, 5 different ways to tenderize your steak on the carnivore diet. Each method brings something unique to the table, whether it's the simplicity of dry brining, the speed of a meat tenderizer, or the exotic flair of pineapple. Which one will you choose? Let me know in the comments below.
Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high-quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.